All right, so here's another problem on how to solve an absolute value equation. So we talked about the steps before on how to solve these problems, and this one's going to have some extraneous solutions. So what were those steps again? We're going to isolate the absolute value term. So isolate the absolute value, which in this case, we're just looking at that x plus 1 right here. So we're basically just going to take that and get everything over to the other side, which means I'm going to start by adding 1x to both sides of this equation. So I'm going to have 2 times the absolute value of x plus 1 equals 4x minus 4. At this point, I'm going to undo this multiplication by dividing by 2 to get rid of that 2, and therefore divide the whole other side by 2. So then I'm going to get that first step done. I'm going to have the absolute value of x plus 1, and that's going to equal 2x minus 2. So that's step 1. We're going to isolate the absolute value. As we talked about previous video, an absolute value is a distance, and it's a distance, if you think about a number line, a distance from a point on the number line. So if we're saying a distance is a certain number away from a point, there's going to be 2 answers, right? Or sometimes there's 2 answers. So the second step here is going to be to create 2 equations. Create 2 equations, and we talked about how to create those 2. The first one, the first solution set, is going to be just as you see it without the absolute value bar. So we're going to say x plus 1 equals 2x minus 2. The second equation will be the same thing, except we're going to reverse the sign, which in equals means I'm just going to keep it as equals, and then take the opposite of the value on the right. So I'm going to take the opposite of 2x minus 2. Essentially what that's doing is just going to change the signs. So on that right hand side we're going to get negative 2x plus 2. So now we're going to have 2 equations. We're going to have 2 equations, and then we're just going to solve those equations. So let's do the one on the left. I'm going to, in this case, I'm going to subtract off a 1x to get it on the right hand side. So I can keep that as just a 2x minus x is just a 1x, or an x minus 2 equals 1. And then if I add 2 to both sides, I have my answer. One of my answers is x equals 3. And then for the second equation, all right, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to add 2x to both sides. I'm going to get 3x plus 1 equals 2. I'm going to subtract 1. So 3x equals 1. And so then I'm going to divide by 3. So I get x equals 1/3. And so I get 2 answers here. X equals 3. And x equals 1/3. All right, so we got 2 answers. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to check our answers, right? So step 3 here was to solve, right? Solve both. And then we're going to check our answers. So if you look at this, we're just going to take our 2 answers and plug them back into our original equation, either the one up here, or we can do the one that is right here in green. So we're going to do that one in green here. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to check basically this x plus 1 equals 2 times x minus 2. That one right here. So let's say we check, for some reason I lost my answer here. First answer here was x equals 3. So let's say we're going to check x equals 3 into this equation right here. I'm going to put that right here. So I'm just going to plug in 3 into my x, and then I'm going to make sure that the left-hand side equals the right-hand side. So in this case, I have 3 plus 1 is 4, or the absolute value of 4 equals 2 times 3 is 6, minus 2 is 4. So the absolute value of 4 equals 4, and that is true. So that's a solution. And then I'm going to check x equals 1/3. So if we do the same thing here, right, I'm going to plug in a 1/3 for my x instead of the 3. So I'm going to take this as 1/3 and take this as 1/3. So the absolute value of 1/3 plus 1 would be 1 and 1/3. Right? And then on the right hand side, I'm going to have 2 times 1/3. Well, that's 2/3. Subtract 2. So if I have 2/3 and I subtract 2, that's kind of like saying, well, I have 2 wholes and I'm going to subtract 2/3. My answer is going to be 1 and 1/3, but it's going to be negative, right? This is going to be negative 1 and 1/3. Whereas the left-hand side, the absolute value of 1 and 1/3 is still going to be positive. Positive 1 and 1/3. So is this true right here? And of course, that's not true. An absolute value is never capable of producing a negative result because it's a distance, and distance is always positive. So this is false. So this right here would be considered an extraneous solution. So I'm going to write extraneous solution, which really means it's not a solution at all. And so my only true answer here is going to be x equals 3.